There is an edgy team in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, and it is Wednesday. So that makes this a Woody Wednesday. Snap Judgments version with Bill Landis and Austin Ward. Ryan Day said it a few times. The Buckeyes echoed it. They want to be edgy. They felt like they're edgy. They're on edge, getting ready for Oregon.
Ryan Day, I think most Wednesdays we've talked to him, has seemed pretty pleased with the way that this team is practicing, right? And I think G. Scott might have said, or maybe it wasn't G. Scott, Brandon Innes perhaps said that it felt like that started last week, that this team really took another step in the way it was preparing for the Iowa game. I think a team as talented as Iowa does, especially on defense, gets your attention.
Right.
And it kind of feels like Oregon clearly, has their attention as it should. So I don't know. I get they feel good about their prep, right? Which is all you can ask for at this point. But yeah, an edgy team practicing with a little bit of attitude as they get ready for the Ducks. I
do feel like Ryan Day has been more willing to say, I don't know, I didn't like that practice. Wasn't the best.
Mm-hmm.
Some coaches paper over it, and they're always going to say every practice was great, and publicly that's the way that they handle it. I feel like there's more truth to some of these assessments. Now, we're not going to know for sure if it matters the way they practiced on Tuesday or tonight in the Woody until Saturday. But we've often got a feel if they weren't really pleased about something, and that hasn't happened a lot this season, but I think we're getting some pretty true assessments.
I think we are, and I think we've been around this team enough in these sort of settings to know if they're tight at all, or if they're kind of flat or whatever. This feels like they're in the right frame of mind for this game, which, doesn't, to your point, doesn't guarantee you anything, but I think you and I would also be telling people if we felt something was off too. So it just seems like, and I guess it's a reflection of a veteran team.
Yeah,
I think, right? Like Josh Fryer was asked a bunch of different questions about why do you think this team's better at this or good at this? He's like, experience. And I think that experience also shows up in the preparation they're putting in.
I felt the exact same way. I thought that Josh Fryer sort of typified all of that, because he talked about his own experiences where a year ago, it's like first time starter at right tackle, big games. He said that, he felt nervous, or he knew that there were national broadcasters and fans and everybody else watching every move. And then he wasn't really, or he fully comfortable with that. And now he's been through that whole process. And he said, well, that's the same for Josh Simmons. It's the same for Donovan Jackson after multiple years. It's the same for Seth McLaughlin after multiple years starting at Alabama. The question was more about the offensive line specific, but I could take that to mean the entirety of the team, where they all have veterans who've been through many of these games. And again, it doesn't guarantee you that you're going to win them on Saturday night. You're still flying across the country to play the number 3 team in the nation. Not going to be easy, but you're much better prepared for it if you're this version of Ohio State than maybe last year or 2 years ago.
Yeah, and that's not surprising, I guess. That you expect that from this group. I just, that's why I don't worry about the travel part of this either, or because what is this team going to encounter that it already hasn't seen, right? And I guess this is a new environment that they haven't been to before, but there's even some guys on the team that I think were recruited by Oregon, who had visited Oregon, who would know what it's about. Chip Kelly clearly knows what it's about. So even that unknown factor, they sort of have ways to address it. So then it just becomes about the ball. It becomes about the matchups, right? Those sort of, I don't know, off the field, off the radar kind of things just don't apply as much, I think, to Ohio State, which is not always been the case, because this is often a team that is quite young. And now it is one of the older teams in college football. It's why Ryan Day wanted to build the roster this way, to be able to handle moments like this well.
And, this roster is comprised of guys who, they've not won in the Big House, but they played there. They've won in Happy Valley. They went on the road and they beat Notre Dame in a pretty adverse situation, do or die drive a year ago. So, with all due respect to everything that we've heard about the noise and the hostility of going into Outson Stadium, that part of it is not new for Ohio State either. Even when we were out here at the end of practice tonight, maybe there had been crowd noise previously, but there wasn't.
There definitely was. I could hear it when I was in the lobby earlier, so there was definitely crowd noise.
At least the end of practice. It wasn't constant. You're never going to get a reprieve from it. Now, again, I'm not saying they didn't ever have it on, because we heard it in the middle of the afternoon here on Tuesday. But I don't know that that's a. Josh Fryer also was talking about that. Are you guys prepared to go silent and do all these other things? Done that before? Yeah. Not worried about it.
What was it like at Michigan State? Was it pretty loud at the beginning of that game?
Early on, it was.
Yeah. So even that, there are teams, or maybe it was like last week, there were teams that were like going on the road for the first time, and you wondered how that might, like Ohio State. I'm not saying Michigan State's Oregon or that Spartan Stadium is Autzen Stadium, but they at least have done it once with this group, and they've done it throughout their careers. Like again, it's just like it's a thing you have to handle, right? Once you get in it, and maybe this will be different than a lot of other venues in the Big Ten. I don't know. I've never been there. But it sounds like it gets pretty wild, and this is the biggest game in the history of that stadium, so that adds to it. I just kind of think they'll be ready for it.
They will be ready with Cardinal Tate in tow as well. There'll probably be a tweet on Friday from ESPN. So Cardinal Tate's available. I'm going to tell you right now, he's going to be there and he's going to play. He's ready to go.
It's a big addition to the lineup, right? Like I was thinking last week that there were some compelling matchups with Iowa's secondary against Ohio State's receivers, but Iowa didn't have the third guy to match with the third receiver.
Right.
And I think that's maybe true of this matchup as well. Like Oregon's got a good secondary. They have one really good corner in Jabbar Muhammad. They have a pretty good nickel, but I don't know how solid that other corner spot is. So then you put, and I don't mean to disparage the guys who did play. Bryson Rodgers and Brandon Inniss played well. They had some big time catches last week against Iowa, but bringing Cardinal Tate back to this offense just makes it kind of whole again, right? Like there's a perimeter blocking element that Cardinal Tate brings. Like I think he's their best perimeter blocker, so that's huge. And I do think he'll have some matchups to exploit potentially in this game. So they were fine without him, although I guess maybe there was a time during the game where they thought like they might throw him out there based off what you guys were saying. So
I don't believe that.
Yeah,
I think Cardinal Tate believes it.
Yeah,
but I don't think
which I appreciate.
Yeah.
I appreciate the confidence in his ability to change that game. But he is very much flown under the radar with how good Jeremiah Smith has been and how good Emeka Egbuka is. But he shouldn't. And for as much talk as there is about Oregon having three really good, dangerous receivers in this game, Ohio State has at least three, probably more than that. And Cardinal Tate is certainly one of them. So I'm glad he's back for it.
We've made a point a lot about how Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka complement each other and make sure that teams can't just say, well, we're going to double this guy or that guy, and they'll make you pay. Cardinal Tate is the one that keeps everyone honest, and I think ensures that one-on-one matchups are going out across the board. Because what do you want to do? You want a nickel or a linebacker on Cardinal Tate? Let me tell you, Dan Lanning, that would be a very bad idea. You cannot win that matchup.
I would advise against it. And that, like, I was talking with G. Scott a little bit about, he had said something in camp about how excited he was for how Ohio State was going to run the ball. And I asked him like why he felt that way so early on in the process. And he just said, because our offense is so balanced, like we have so many weapons. And Ohio State's always had weapons, but it does kind of feel like maybe they're maximizing all of them right now in a way that hasn't always hit. And just adding another one to the equation with Cardinal Tate, it's obvious, but that just makes them all the more dangerous because he can catch it and he can kill you, or he'll bury your safety on a run play and he can kill you, right? So there's a versatility to Cardinal Tate that
which way do you want to die?
Which way would you like to die? There's a versatility to Cardinal Tate's game that maybe isn't appreciated enough right now, but I think might be after Saturday.
All right. As you bounced around and heard from the Buckeyes and Ryan Day, what else did you learn? What else stood out to you?
What else stood out to me? I thought the way that let's talk about this. I think it's interesting that they have a lefty quarterback to help them prepare for this game, which like I didn't think of until I saw them walking off the field. It's like, oh yeah, Aaron Olin's left-handed and they're playing a left-handed quarterback. And I asked Ryan Day about it, and he said the oddity of facing a lefty is more about receivers catching the ball. But then Denzel Burke did say like it is nice to have a more accurate look of what they're going to see, rather if they would have just thrown a right-handed quarterback back there on scout team. So Aaron Olin's been doing some of that stuff. Denzel Burke said he thought he was giving him a good look because Eric can move around a little bit too, the same way that Dylan Gabriel can. So what does it mean for this game? Like, I don't know, but it's an interesting little tidbit, I think, like way down the line of things that are most important here that Ohio State can actually practice against a left-handed quarterback before it's going to see one on Saturday.
We're talking a lot about the value of these practice reps. Like,
yeah,
I think, again, I don't want to jinx anything for Ohio State's purpose or like put too much pressure on, well, you said you had great practices and you didn't win on Saturday night. We don't know what's going to happen. But I think this team actually legitimately enjoys the process in a way that I don't know that I've always felt. Again, at Thomas Jefferson via Chip Kelly said that comparison is the thief of joy. Mm-hmm. So maybe I shouldn't say that this is different than 1 year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago. I can say for sure that this team seems to really embrace that part of it. And even just talking about a detail like that Denzel Burke said, well, I'm used to seeing it come out of the hand of a right-handed quarterback. So the fact that Ohio State can duplicate that and what that may mean for someone who prepares with the thoroughness and attention to detail that Denzel Burke does, like, yeah, that seems pretty cool that he appreciates that.
I think they do talk about the preparation more. And maybe that again is just a reflection of the experience. But I even think back to, it must have been maybe after the Akron game when we talked with Josh Fryer, and he was talking about how the practices are much harder and how Chip Kelly is very precise and doesn't really move on from anything until he feels like they have it down cold. And it sounded like a miserable experience, but he was saying it with a smile on his face. Like, okay, like obviously there is a grind to this. We all know that, especially this year with more games potentially on the docket. But whether it's just being older and understanding what it takes, or having the scars of not accomplishing what they have needed to accomplish the last couple of years, it does seem like they are embracing that part of this process perhaps more than they have in the past.
The truth teller also seemed pretty confident about what this Ohio State defense could do against Oregon.
Yeah, he stopped short of like guaranteeing anything. There was a point where I thought, "Ooh, what's he going to say?" Man, he didn't. He stopped himself.
Depends on when you asked him.
When he was sitting in front of a microphone, anyway. But yeah, super excited, I think, to put on display what the secondary can do, because they've just not faced an opponent that has been able to match up with them, right? Like I know Marshall threw it a little bit, and Iowa tried to throw it and didn't really succeed, I guess. But
both Denzel and Cody Simon talked about some of those third downs that they had to play.
Yeah, I think you've seen those guys more or less play the way they're supposed to play, but this is a step up with this receiver trio, and Denzel Burke certainly isn't going to back down from that. We didn't talk to Davis Igbinosun, but I'm sure he would have said many of the same things, perhaps would have even said them a little more candidly than even Denzel would, because those guys are uber confident and they're excited to show that against Oregon.
I did think that Davis Igbinosun set the tone early on. I mentioned that, I think, on Snap Judgments on Saturday. Like, it was the first play of the game, and it was just him coming up to stop the run, and he was giving the Dikembe Mutombo rest in peace finger. Like, right. He was ready for that. And I think that that's significant, too, to look at this matchup, because I had made a point a week ago, and if, we didn't bring him up necessarily in the PFF podcast daily on Wednesday morning, but, like, he's coming off of two of his worst games in terms of coverage that he's had in his career. He was the highest graded coverage player for Ohio State on Saturday against Iowa. Now, there weren't a ton of reps, as you mentioned. Iowa can't really throw the football. He had the interception, and he only gave up one catch, and it was for 14 yards. There was nothing after that. He immediately made the tackle, and he was good against the run. Like I had mentioned and brought up on Weekend Kickoff, maybe it's possible that Jermaine Matthews can slide in there, but that's the version of Davis Igbinosun that Ohio State needs, especially if they're going to go against Dylan Gabriel and Oregon on Saturday night and win. Yeah,
I think he's the highest graded tackler in the secondary. He might be the highest graded tackler on the whole defense. I was looking at that the other day. This is why you have a guy like this game, where the premium was on tackling in space and making sure 3 yards doesn't turn into 50, like we've talked about all week. Like that maybe might make Davis Igbinosun like their most important defensive back in this game. I don't know how much Ohio State's corners are going to be put in the position to like carry guys down the field and make those kind of plays. It's going to be played like a little bit in a box, I think, and they're going to have to tackle in space. And Davison's awesome at that. It's his best attribute. I think the rest of the secondary has been good at that, but they're going to have to be at their best this weekend. So maybe Davison can set the tone there too.
Yeah, it's another thing to watch. Anything else you picked up?
Josh Fryer did say that it's hard to mimic Jordan Birch, the defensive end for Oregon.
Is it?
Yeah, they're not a whole lot of 290-pound guys who move like that walking around. So he said there's not really anybody on the scout team who can do it. He's been getting his feel for that by going up against JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer, which is obviously pretty good prep. But I just think a lot of respect for what Oregon presents as a challenge along the defensive line. I think, like I said, I think Ohio State's offensive line is ready for it, but it's just that's another position group on this team that knows it's going to be in the spotlight and is excited for the challenge, but it will be a challenge. So obviously it's a spot to watch this week.
It's a challenge. It's another day closer. Thanks to Woody Wednesday being in the rearview mirror. Snap judgments are done. We are on the way, heading to Bill's not. He's staying here. Berm and I are heading to Oregon tomorrow morning. You can hear from us 3 things Thursday on the podcast daily. It'll be the next thing on the channel. And everything else. We'll still have bold predictions on Friday. We're going to figure out a time to do that. Bill's got more stuff coming on Kings of the North. Is there a Kings of Columbus on tap, or does that just get covered on Wednesday's show?
It was, so Kings of Columbus went up Wednesday evening. It is a 2-hour and 15-minute Ohio State Oregon preview if you're into that sort of thing.
So there's a lot more that you can get, is the point there, and we've still got more coming as we get another day closer to Ohio State at Oregon, 7:30 NBC Saturday night, and you can also stream it on the Cock. He's Bill Landis. I am Austin Ward. These have been Snappy Jays. We'll see you later.